You're welcome back. Still the conversation on Lagos television. Words are so powerful, and when it comes to stringing words together, we are more gifted than each other. The word that you speak can make or mar any situation, and your use of words determines how far you go sometimes when engaging people or an audience. Right now on the conversation, our focus will be on the art of spoken words, otherwise known as poetry, and we have a gentleman in the studio who is an author, Youve Alabi Balogun. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, so the art of using words to speak, make impact or engage audience, how does it come to you? Is it what you can learn, or is it inborn, or one can acquire it?
Well, I think it applies differently for everyone. Because when it comes to me, I feel like I found the art of spoken word and poetry naturally. It has always been in me that, that urge to always express, to always tell the people, the stories of the people at the grassroots. It has always been there for me right from the cradle. But then, while we are still in the process of doing it, we learn while still doing it. We encounter other poets who have been doing it for so long, learn one or two things from them. So it's a mix of learning from others, while bringing what is natural to you to life.
Which is your talent.
Exactly.
Okay. I like your voice.
Yes, I was going to talk about his voice now.
Thank you so
So what
much.
is voice projection? What's the correlation with voice projection and the art of spoken words?
Well, spoken word, when it comes to spoken word and spoken word poetry, when we speak, what we are engaging in now is spoken word.
Okay.
But once it merges with poetry, it becomes an elevation of the thought. So you are not just selling your message to the world now. You are selling your vocals to the world. You are selling everything that has to do with you. It's more like you are putting every other element that has to do with drums, percussion aside, and you are using your voice and your message as a selling point. So you have to be very confident of what you are saying before you can face the world, because why tell a story that you cannot defend to the world?
Okay, so aside from your voice now, what are the other major ingredients of the art of spoken words? How do you engage your audience in such a way that they won't be distracted when you are delivering your poetry?
Well, the first thing is that there is an art for everyone, and not every form of art applies to every audience. There's an audience for every art, there's an art for every audience. Once you understand that fact and you bring to them the kind of art that matters to them, you have to be able to tell your story. It goes down into the backdoor process before you get onto the stage, rather than what happens on the stage. So it is why there's the mirror process for most creatives, where you have to face your mirror within your house, and you actually perform before your mirror as though you are performing to the audience on the stage. Once you can conquer that fear within your inner room, you can conquer any fear when you are in the public spotlight, and that way you are speaking to an audience as though you are speaking to your mirror. You are telling them a story that is important to them, and it is convincing enough for them to listen to.
Okay, I see that you are very big on culture from your attire. So I want to know, how does culture, influence the art of spoken words?
Well, I create poetry in English, then Yoruba, but I heavily major on Yoruba poetry and art. And it is because I feel like I've met different people who, for one reason or the other, do not have a religion or do not want to belong to a particular form of spirituality. But I don't think I've ever encountered anyone who does not have a culture. Everyone have a source they are coming from. So I believe so much in telling these stories that are primary to us. Because if we don't have an idea of where we are coming from at the end of the day, how can we even have an idea of where we are going to? So at the end of the day, when you understand your culture, when you understand the elements that makes up your identity. You import the nuances into the art you create. And that is why when you go to a Nigerian audience and you are performing to them, you are not talking about pizza because they cannot relate to it.
Pizza.
But when you bring it down to Nigerian jollof rice or
Okay.
they can relate to it because it is their nuances at the end of the day.
Wow. So, how long have you been at this, and how did you discover your talents? Did anybody influence you, or your environment, or you have mentors?
Well, I've been writing since I was very young. I mean, as far as I could remember, I've been writing since I was in primary school, short pamphlets, prose, and all of that. I started the art of spoken word professionally 7 years ago. But prior to then, I've always been one to, because growing up then, my dad does not allow us to mingle around the environment and all of that. So it was more of, we come back from school, we do our assignments, then we watch movies and then, engage with him. So I needed to find a way to express my imaginations. I needed to find a way to express my thoughts. And the only way I could do that was to get a pen and put my thoughts to paper. So everything I did within then, I didn't have a particular mentor I was going through. Instead, I was building up my imagination, exchanging thoughts with my parents, and picking from my environment what I could see. I grew up in Eora, and this is somewhere that has that name when it comes to hooliganism, vandalism. I wanted to be that guy from a small room who has a lot of message to actually pass to the world. And the only way I could do that was not to look at the people I saw in my environment. Because if I look at them, they don't have anything to offer me at the end of the day. So I had to stay within that small room and create a message that I feel like, okay, if it ever gets out to the world, it can be a world global export.
So 7 years as a professional. So how has it been so far?
Well,
from that small room to now being on TV.
Right. Well, I think the first thing is that Nigeria is still getting better when it comes to actually appreciating the art of spoken word poetry compared to other forms of art. But the journey for me has been really interesting because breaking out, building that confidence, going from that person who has always been in a small room to actually consistently having to address the larger world. I have gone from that alien voice to someone who is now very familiar with the stage. And yes, there have been the ups and downs, there have been the limitations. Living as an artist in Nigeria of today, as a full-time artist, is a battle on its own. But I mean, the sustenance has been great, there has been acceptance, and then sometimes when you actually feel like throwing in the towel, you get a random message from someone who listens to your work, and maybe because of your work, they are inspired to do something, they are inspired to keep at what they are doing. I think that is enough consolation for what I do as an artist, because at the end of the day, it's about the impact created, so much that when even the artist is no longer here, the works you have done will outlive you.
Wow.
I'm sure you must have read some works of poets that are of the older generation. Now we are in the age of ICT, and you're a poet, you're an author. What advantage do you think the new generation have over the old ones?
Well, I think one advantage we have in this current generation is social media, to be very honest. There is so much, because even when I started writing poems then, there was so much repository for me to just put works on Facebook and then get it to as much followers as I have, or those who decide to share. Then it has gone from, people who have access to print books. But now you just have to have data on your phone, and you can virtually search for anything and get it. And because it's spoken word poetry, even if you don't go to a concert, you can record a video within your house or an audio and put it out there, and people would watch it and they will get to relate to it. And I think one dichotomy that exists between this generation and the earliest generation is that the form of art has transformed totally. It used to be rigid then. It used to follow meters, structure, and all of that. But now it is free verse. We are expressing without following the rules. When you know the stories that you want to tell, you do not have to exactly, align with a meter form or, a lyrical form. You just have to tell that story in a way that is original to you and that is original to the people you are telling. So we have that advantage with social media, and I think that a lot of artists are using it, because even if not for social media, maybe I would have still been within that small room.
In Eora?
Yes.
Okay, so how viable is the spoken words industry in Nigeria, from your experience so far?
Well, it is very valuable. It is very valuable. Maybe for imagined voices, it always initially looks like it is not valuable. But the more you get into it, you realize that there are so much brands who want to actually associate with spoken word poets, using it for brand commercials, advertisement. There are people in diaspora reaching out to Nigerian poets every time. I recently engaged on a project with United States and female genital mutilation.
Okay.
There are so many campaigns that has to do with spoken word poetry. So it's not even until you perform, it's not until you go on the stage before you can earn lucratively from the art. And then there are poets who are so focused on, printing books, writing poetry books, putting them out, poetry courses, putting them on sale. So there are different means to earn funds from the art at the end of the day, while still making a name for yourself. Apart from the fact that you could put out a poetry album and earn royalties from streaming platforms, and then at the end of the day, that percentage is like okay for you at the end of the day.
Wow. All right, so take us through your own specialty of poetry. Is it music? Is it chanting? Which one is really your area of core competence, and what are the process of emerging with a good product when it comes to delivering poetry?
Well, I think when it comes to me, I call myself a performance poet most times, because I'm at that stage in my career where I'm constantly exploring theater, music, choreography, importing it into poetry. Because at the end of the day, not everyone would be a lover of poetry. But when you import theater, music, choreography into it, people see a form of art that they can relate to. And what is important is that the message is passed at the end of the day. So personally for me, I am an orator. I don't sing so much. I'm a very terrible dancer, but I'm a very eloquent speaker. So, and I think when it comes to my art, or for every other art that has to do with spoken word poetry, really, the first trick is to always write. When you have your story that you want to tell on paper, you put it in your mind, you memorize it, you go through the process. Whether I have a performance or not, I'm always memorizing every day, because you don't know when the next performance is coming. You don't know when the next show is coming. You don't know when the next project is coming. So you must always have something upstairs within you. And then when you've done that, I have more than 30 poems within my head. So if I get a random call for a performance, even if I don't have to write a new poem, I probably have one poem that will be befitting for that particular event or project within the poems I have. And then, you are always creating as an artist, not for the consumers at the end of the day. You are creating for yourself. If you don't love the story you are telling, how can the people you are telling it to even appreciate it?
That's true.
At the end of the day. So I'm very keen on, that rigorous process, always creating, always writing, and then at the end of the day, the world is literally there. They are waiting for you to bring something to them, and they would accept your offerings.
Bukola, this energy is much.
As in, I'm feeling the energy. So talking about writing, what elements of language do you pay attention to when you write your poems?
Well, I think visually. Okay. So I am very big on creating images. I believe that the best way to interrogate your audience is to play with their minds, create pictures in their minds. And because I grew up in Eora, where there's still that trauma of literally walking around the streets, and then, maybe a riot happened last night and someone has been beheaded on the road. I have all of those images in my head. So when I'm writing, I am importing those pictures into my writings. I believe that the job of an artist is to entertain and then educate. So as much as I want to entertain my audience, I equally want to educate them. I don't just want them to look at my work, then laugh. I want them to be able to think. I want them to be able to equally interrogate their environment when they are done reading. So I'm very big on imageries. I'm very big on metaphor. And I believe that every element they exist to be used. And because I write mostly in Yoruba itself has so much floweries. There is Akonluede, there is Owe, there is Ashamo, there is Alo. So there is so much to pick from. You cannot exhaust the list.
I think you should just do something for us first. Because now...
In Yoruba?
Yes, let's start with Yoruba.
Okay.
Yes.
ẹ pè wá lórúkọ bàbá wa àwa lọ́mọ Oòduà àtẹ̀wọ̀n rọ̀ ẹ sà wá lórí kí èyí tá à ń jẹ́ ilé bàbá ọmọ kì í bọmọ lẹ́rù Ògúndé pé kọ́mọ Yorùbá ronú afárígá wọn pé afọ̀rọ̀ jomi toro ọ̀rọ̀ atúnkùn ònùònù àbálọ àbábọ̀ iṣu ìgbodò kọ̀kọ̀ta òṣùpá ràràn mọ́jú ó tútú jẹ́ ọmọ Yorùbá di gbòǹgbò ọ̀nà àfàtó àtẹ̀pá orí tó yẹ ó máa dádé ń dóye ìwọ̀fà àlárí laṣọ bàbá tí àìwò lọ́mọ Yorùbá fi ń ṣẹ̀ṣọ́ rìn bíyàwó ilé òṣè mínímí ọ̀rọ̀ òwò kò séwé kò ségbò kò sórí kò sérò ẹ wí fún wọn bó ti wù kẹjá ṣe bí ara àlẹ̀ tó ibú nílé ẹja ọ̀dọ́ ń tàwọn ẹ̀rùn àṣà bàbá wo lábà wọn ìṣẹ̀ṣe wo ní ṣùgbọ́n Yorùbá yìí ṣoyin àdó bẹ́ẹ̀ ó dùn lédè Yorùbá yìí ṣèkún ẹ̀yìn bẹ́ẹ̀ ó dùn láṣà Yorùbá ni mí lọ́jọ́kọ́jọ́ Yorùbá ni mí tọkàntọkàn.
Okay, Yusuf, so some of the challenges that we are facing right now in the country, youth restiveness,
drug abuse,
yeah,
yes. Cultism,
domestic violence, cultism, and the fact that our government, they are not really doing enough to impact the people. Do you have any particular job that you have produced that is targeted at that?
Well, I think if I write 10 poems in a week, there's every tendency that about 6 or 7 would be on societal issues. I rarely write about mundane topics because I feel like at the end of the day, the duty of the creative is to tell important stories. A griot is a noble in the society. If you cannot tell stories, that it's only when the audience are happy, it's only when they are in a positive state of mind that they can consume the art you are offering to them. If you cannot tell them a story that is important to them, that expresses their plight, the job of me as a griot at the end of the day is to go from Ijora, go to the world, tell the story of hungry kids in Ijora, tell the story of children who are unable to go to school because they don't have school fees to pay in Ijora, tell the stories of people whose homes constantly get flooded within Ijora because, they are living in the worst living condition possible. There's literally a school in Ijora that the fence is about to break, and the proprietor, the only thing he's concerned about is making money at the end of the day. Yet he has kids going there. These stories would never probably get out to the larger world, but I'm a griot within that broken society. Now, my duty is to go out, constantly write about them, regardless of the risk that comes with it. We live in a generation where people are afraid to tell their truths. They are afraid to create art that is vocal because they feel that, they might get killed, they might get arrested. But I think that for you to be an artist, you are already immortal. The stories you are telling are already there. No one can take those voices or those words away.
Yes.
So why don't you rather tell the stories that are important to you and dare the risk? At least posterity would be able to remember you, that you did your duty while you were here.
Okay, over there is our colleague. She was lost while you were speaking because she's not so versed with Yoruba. Unlike me.
Who?
Over there is Adebayo. She has a question for you.
I grew up listening to, is it Ewi?
Yes.
Yeah, I grew up listening to Ewi. And, then it just used to fascinate me. But this generation, today's generation.
I hardly speak.
Yes, yes, we have their senior there sitting next to you, Ajibola.
Really?
What did you say?
That shit was bad.
What did you say?
Don't worry, I'll tell you.
How receptive?
Can you just calm down?
How receptive is this generation towards what you do?
Well, I think that people are going back to the past now because 6-7 years back, even till now, maybe it has reduced. I'm not even dressed in my full attire. I could get in a bus and then someone is saying, because I'm using beads and it feels it's fetish. So compared to, I've had a performance in Abeokuta where I was stoned bottled water because the guy believed Onkpo for Lori stage. So there are a lot of people who still feel like when it comes to language, they feel it's fetish, they feel it's pagan. But what people do not realize is that even the English language that we call lingua franca is not lingua franca because of anything. It's an identity of certain people. At the end of the day, it's a representation of certain people. At the end of the day, Yoruba could become a lingua franca. Igbo could become a lingua franca. Same for Hausa or any other language. So as much as there are still so many people who feel like, they could survive without the language, they really do not need the language as long as they understand the lingua franca. A lot of people are going back to their past now. I mean, a lot of people are studying Ifa now. And I don't see how anyone can become an Onifa without understanding Yoruba language. And what people do not realize about detachment from language is that when you move away from the language, you are not just losing the language, you are losing the value associated with the culture of that language. Because if you don't, there are some things that will come naturally to you simply because you understand your language. I mean, I don't want to imagine, there are certain values that are there till now. I am grown up, and if my mom is having a conversation with an adult, I don't need anyone to tell me that I shouldn't interrupt or engage the conversation.
Gen Z,
now,
Someone
who is not versed with the language will definitely delve into the conversation because they feel it is normal. We keep losing so many nuances. We keep losing so many values. And I think it even explains why we have some problem in this particular era. Because as much as, there are some things that were imported from our culture that were not particularly right, or, you know, that had their own negative side effects back then. I feel like there's a whole lot of positivity that are eroding away once we stay away from culture and language. So why I do what I do, beyond communicating necessary stories, is to be able to preserve the stories, is to be able to preserve the language. So if peradventure Yoruba language gets extinct in 50, 60 years to come, I want people to be able to say that, yes, there were enough works created in the language that people can say that, yes, the language actually thrived, the language actually existed. But we cannot say we want people to enjoy the language or we want people to love the language when we are not even creating art. If I call someone down now and I'm speaking Yoruba to that person, they'll probably get tired. But if they experience me chanting in Yoruba language or they watch Ibrahim Chata chanting in Yoruba language on a movie, they will fall in love with the language and they will want to interrogate it. So I feel it rests on us as artists to create more with the language, positively with the language, and do away with, you know, the curse word, the should I say the negative side light of the language. What we push out to the world is what the world sees at the end of the day.
I like what you said.
Yes.
Joy has a
I have a
question.
question. Yeah, dwelling on creating more for the language. Are you open to grooming little children?
Yes, actually, I believe so much that adults are broken. I believe that adults are dry bones. So if you try to stretch a dry bone, it will break. But when it comes to the children, they are the next generation, really. They are the ones that will preserve this at the end of the day. Most of us who are not married will get married in some years and will get busy with family life. And then, you know, before you know it, I can't have the time to be reading ABD. But then little kids who are still 6, 7, 8, they have so much to offer the world. They are the ones who would carry this mantle when we are done with it. So yes, I'm very open when it comes to conversation about the children and the next generation.
Okay, you've done something for us in Yoruba. For our non-Yoruba speaking audience, I feel like you should, you know, entertain them too.
All right.
So let's do something in English.
When the Yorubas want to report a child to the elders, they use his father's name. When they want to report a child to the gods, they use his mother's name. Here to know why. See, it takes a god to recognize another god. I know history has never been kind to our women. Our women, pioneers, originators of language, but at the end of the day, they are regarded as sluts in the black book. I know you are a woman, but that doesn't make you a lesser human. So don't let them bring to you the gong of bad luck. Preaching the gospel of women are weak. Females are weaker, or females are weaker versus you. See, you are a coat of many colors. Do not let people who have never seen rainbows teach you how to be beautiful. Wow. You are slim, you are fat, you oversize baggage, and stop. Do not listen to them. They are merely scared of the powers that reside within you. They said your mothers are witches. So up on those wings and fly so high, far beyond their limited vision. Never ever forget that you are a deity too powerful to be described in just few seconds.
Wow.
You have bribed them. You have bribed them.
I told you earlier that I'm just
Can you do something for fathers too?
Hold on. Before you do something for fathers, I know that this is very spiritual. Do you get disturbed sometimes with this talent?
Well, in 2020, I worked on a particular poem, Iyami Shorunga, and particularly what I was trying to do with that particular work was to deify women, but from the perspective of the Yoruba cosmology of witchcraft. Because one thing I've come to understand about the Yoruba cosmology at the end of the day is that the Nollywood portrayal of witches is not the cultural reality of that language. They are actually seen as women who are rebellious. I worked on this project and a week after, I think that work was still my most successful project so far as an artist. A week after that project, I lost my tongue and I could not practically speak.
Really?
I had to be taken to my hometown, and I was practically incommunicado for over 2 months before I could come back. And then one thing I learned through that process is when you create with a language to an extent, you are awakening forces. Now, when you are awakening forces and you don't know how to summon them back to rest, they begin to torment you. So yes, art is very spiritual. Art is extremely spiritual. It's defined, but you know, once you know the boundaries, once you know what to do, words are very powerful. You could literally catalyze a war with words. It's one thing I've come to realize with Yoruba language especially, and it's what separates our native languages from our English language. You could literally insult someone with English language and it won't slap so hard. But if you use your native language, they will feel the intensity of the word. It's the same thing with invoking powers. It's the same thing with invoking forces. When someone tells you that you're dagba, it goes beyond you will grow old. When they say it goes beyond you would be here for us for long. There are so many elements, there are so many heartfelt emotions reserved within that particular statement. So yes, Yoruba language is extremely spiritual.
Okay, so with that experience that you had when you did the Yam Yoshoro guy, if you tried to,
be mindful of your tongue.
Oh yes,
Did you see the Oshoro girl?
I the Oshoro
He didn't appear at some point. It's so scary.
because it is really scary.
Yes.
So that deter you from you moving forward and
Well-
doing stuff like that in that direction now.
Well, a few months back, I think that was March, I recorded a work on a shoe. And
You said
the studio producer practically called me 2 days later that he has been hearing voices in the studio. So
don't do it here.
I think that one thing that I've learned from this art, especially as a Yoruba artist, is that most people, yes, they have valid reasons to shy away from telling these stories because of the sacredness attached to it. But the question is it dangerous or is it sacred? I think it is more of sacred, and because we are not well informed. I mean, I can literally go to Google now and type Shango, and I'm seeing an incantation for Shango, and I'm just reeling it out without having an understanding of what it actually takes to reel out that incantation. We are so detached away from these stories and from what makes them what they are. So by creating art forms of this nature on those topics, I am at a risk of, delving into something that even I am not privy of. But I think the good part of it at the end of the day is that I am learning. And for every artist, I think that the artists who get to be evergreen and stellar at the end of the day are the ones who tell the unconventional stories. The stories that have been neglected, the stories that have been abandoned. Because even within these stories that are scary, there are things that are private to our journey as ordinary people. Someone has to tell this story at the end of the day.
And you're telling
and maybe if it is my burden to bear them.
All right, so take us through your educational journey and how you have used your work to project Eora, that particular room, that particular environment where you were raised, how you have used your work to change the perception that people have about Eora.
Okay, so talking about my educational background, I left secondary school 7-8 years back. Yeah, I left secondary school 7-8 years back, and the plan, as every other person, was to take SSC, go to university, become a lawyer, and all of that jargons. And then my result got cancelled.
Wow.
And because I was primarily from a home where you had to assemble funds from different rooms to be able to send a child to school. I could not think of attempting a second take. Now, when it comes to Eora or even Nigeria as a whole, I feel like a lot of people are heavily built on getting a degree, getting certificates. People kind of shy away from what you have within your head, and they believe that, okay, until you have a certificate to present to the world, you have nothing to offer the world. So I had to make that rigid decision of going through cycles of ending up like one random guy in the environment, deciding to become a mechanic apprentice, or going to the world with what I feel I have at the end of the day. I feel like there's so much a human can offer beyond a university certificate or degree. So that point in my life was a turning point for me. And I think that was what pushed me into the professional side of the art. Now, looking back 7 years till now, a lot of things has changed in my mentality. I have legit stepped into rooms that I couldn't even have envisaged ever getting into in my life. Even with my certificate. I have gotten on projects I've interacted with. I dropped my debut novel last year, and Karen Baba, professor of anthropology and Yoruba, outside the country, legit sent me a mail commenting about the work and all of that, and it was so heartwarming, because it was one of those things that I could never have imagined that it would happen to me in a lifetime. Now, my dream as an artist at this stage is to go from being that boy in Eora to sell out this language and culture at Oso Arena, London. So every of my step, there are so many people who would step out there and they are very shy to say where they are from. They are very shy to say where they are coming from. But no, I am not shy to say it, because at the end of the day, I still owe a duty to Eora. I still know so many people within that environment who have so many talents, but they are fading away. So many people have become drug addicts simply because they feel like, oh, the world is never ready for them. So as much as I'm going on this individual journey, I'm trying to create a better life for myself. I still know very well that, yes, when the grounds are softer, I have to go back to the beginning and then pull out names, pull out people from that sources, redefine their stories, reshape their mentality. But I can only do that when my story is well grounded. I can only do that when I have a story to tell.
Okay. I like the fact that you recognize your roots, Eora, because you kept mentioning Eora. So let's go back. Share with us your growing up experience in that community. I don't know where Eora is. I've not been there before.
Really?
No, I don't. I don't. So please just share with us your experience growing up in that community for people like us that we don't know anything about Eora. So let's hear from you.
Well, like I earlier said, my dad was one of those parents who would not allow us to mingle around the environment, because he was always fond of saying he had his children in Eora not by choice, but by coincidence. So he wouldn't want us to grow up to be like most of the children in the environment. You could literally wake up by 4 a.m. in Eora and someone is smoking marijuana in the next house, and then there are literally people still sleeping under the bridges till now as I speak. There are homes within the slum I grew up in Eora where a father gives birth to a child, father and mother gives birth to a child, that child grows up in that house, marries a wife into that house, gives birth to a child in that house, and they see it as a cause for celebration at the end of the day.
Anyway, I'm sure that Lagos is better off now.
Right.
Yes, compared to what you had in the past then. Okay, now let's go back to your poetry now. What's the difference between poetry and other arts, like, say, chants, music, even drama? What's the difference?
Well, I say it every time that poetry is a motherboard for every form of art, because especially when it comes to chants, when we break it down to the Yoruba context, we call poetry Ewi. Now, when we say Ewi, there is Ijala, there is Iremoje, there is Rara.
The one they do for at Yoruba weddings. What's that?
That is Ekun Yawo.
Ekun Yawo.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that one.
There is Ekun Yawo, there is Oriki, there is Orile. All of these are forms of poetry.
Okay.
They just have different names that they go by. They are still under the motherboard of poetry. Now, when it comes to prose is just linear storytelling. You are not exactly trying to be cryptic with your message. You are telling the story in a straightforward way. That is why when Chinua Achebe Things Fall Apart is read years from now, the same perspective that we see now is still what other people would equally see, because it is linear storytelling. But I could be crying while writing a poem, and someone could read that poem and could be laughing because they wouldn't understand my intention for writing it. I could infuse the highest level of pain in a single poem and beautify it with so much imagery that someone will actually read it and they will feel, oh, it's therapy. There are a lot of my works that people see as therapy. Someone told me that I have a project with William and Ross, Beginnings and Endings. Someone reached out to me in Brazil that he uses that work as a form of lullaby to fight insomnia for over 3 years now. And this is a work that, as at when we were creating it, we didn't even have any of that idea in mind. We just wanted to play around language. So poetry is cryptic. It's extremely cryptic compared to prose. Prose is linear storytelling, it's direct storytelling. You are not concealing so many things. Why drama is just you bringing the stage to page. You are creating dialogues, you are giving names to those people. But you know, poetry infuses both the element of prose, it infuses the element of theater. You could perform poetry. You could break Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe into a stage play and perform it and still infuse poetry into it. Everything that is within the pages of Chinua Achebe Things Fall Apart is something that a poet could write within 10 lines. Yet, someone will read Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, read that same poem, and they will not be able to know that it is telling the same story but in different manners. Okay,
Yusuf, do you have any particular work about Lagos or any chants that you want to recite here about Lagos?
Well, I have an ongoing poem about Lagos, but I don't have it fully in my head yet.
Okay.
So Can we have the tip of it?
I'll be shooting myself in the leg, but I am very sure that it is one of those works that would definitely come to life before this year runs out.
Okay, there's a particular segment on this program, we call it Lagos Sense.
Okay.
My phone had been stolen, times without number in Lagos. You know, my pocket picked. Share with us your own Lagos sense, the kind of experience that you have in Lagos that actually awaken your mind that, oh, I'm actually in Lagos, forgetting the fact that you were raised in Eora, where all sort of things happen.
Well, I think one of the weirdest experiences that was the only time my phone got stolen anyways. I was on a bike, I think it was on the island. I was on a bike and I was making a call. I connected my earpiece to my phone. And then the next thing I just knew was that a slap came from nowhere. And, you know, by the time I would recollect what was going, the phone was gone and the earpiece was still on my ears.
Oh my God.
So I think of Lagos as a very weird place, to be honest. You just have to be hyperactive. You just have to be hyper alert. You don't know where the next random event is coming from. And most times you don't even have an explanation for it when it happens. You could literally get into a bus and, I've forgotten my change with the conductor several times. You could literally give the driver money and he's telling you, oh, thief for me lowo. So, you know, it's weird. But I think that is what makes Lagos fun at the end of the day.
So it's a simple case of shine your eyes
exactly.
when you are in Lagos.
Right.
Okay, so before you go, when I was in school, I did literature in school. But I had big problem with poems because I felt like it was boring. But the way you brought it to life now, so where exactly did we miss it then? Because the way you brought it into life, I really want to go into to poetry now and start reciting poems and chant and do all those stuff. So why did we get it wrong then in school? Our teachers are to blame or who?
Well, I still say it to you now that we have a curriculum problem when it comes to literature, because if we bring the orators that I know, the creatives that I know outside the space professionally, if we bring them into a school environment now and tell them to teach literature for a month, people's orientation about the arts would totally change. Because what is being taught in school, again, is very rigid. You are teaching a Shakespearean poem that is not even our nuances at the end of the day. It's not even the idea within those works are not exactly primary to our stories at the end of the day. You are telling them to break it down, to go by meter, to go by lyrics and all of that. There is no way it won't be difficult for people. I, as a student, had issues with poetry as a form of literature back then in school. But when you go out and you experience the practical aspects of it, you discover that it's not meant to be rigid. So I think it's a case of, one, revisiting the curriculum totally. It doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be a battle. It doesn't have to be a battle. It is a game of expression. at the end of the day. Let people express freely. Let them tell their stories the way they want to tell it. It's not a must that we are writing just like Charles Dickens wrote years back. I am writing within my form. I have found my style. It's not compulsory that in a few years to come, people who want to write Yoruba poems must write like me. No. They should equally study. They can study my works, yes. They can understand my works, but they should find their own voice. They should find their own style and write with it. So I feel like we have to stop teaching literature in school as a kind of, literature is mathematical, yes, but it's not extremely mathematical or rigorous. We have to make it interactive. Take students out on excursions. Let them go to poetry events. Let them experience random poetry engagement. Let them see how it's being done practically outside. Life is more than the four walls of a classroom.
Okay,
Wow.
for creative gods like you, small g now, do you think the society is doing enough to appreciate your work, and even government?
Well, I genuinely feel like there's still so much that could be done, because every day, apart from being a creative who is very private to that scenario, I know so many creatives who are leaving the art, who are retiring into something else because they can't sustain their craft, they can't sustain themselves with their craft. They are not even able to fund projects because they don't have enough. And then, you know, even when they get events, the remuneration is not worthy enough. I feel like as much as there are creative grants and then, you know, there are support for different industries, I feel there's still so much that could be done for creative stakeholders, especially creatives who are just coming up, who are just finding their voices. In fact, it does not always have to be monetary at the end of the day. Sometimes what certain creatives just need is the platform to express, to, you know, reach a larger world, because they know that when they share their gifts to a larger world, opportunities would come from it. There's still so much that can be done. There is still really so much that can be done, but I believe that we would get there one stage at a time.
Okay, so now let's talk about legends. Now, I know in accounting we have the late Chief Akintola Williams. So let's talk about poetry now. Who are the legends when it comes to poetry? In Nigeria, I don't want us to go outside Nigeria. So who are the legends, people that you look up to?
Well, I say it every time that I'm a scion of many influences, but I studied Olanrewaju Adepoju a lot.
Oh,
yes, I studied him a lot when it comes to Ewe. Then Olatubosun Oladapo. Then we have Ayoewebiyi. These are people that I consume their works a lot. Then we have Aduni Nefertiti. These are people that I consume their works a lot. I consume their ideology a lot. And then there are people who are not exactly actively spoken word poetry. There is Segun Akinlolu, Beautiful Nubia.
Oh, yes.
I think I love
another
consumed all of his works.
Yes.
Because his ideology, the kind of art he creates, just it strikes a balance with mine entirely. These are people that I feel like even the country is not celebrating them enough. Genuinely, I feel like they are not getting the mainstream flowers that they deserve. But yes, they are not creating it for the flowers. At the end of the day, they are creating it because it's important to them. Professor Sophie Oluwole, the late Professor Sophie Oluwole, is also someone I consume my ideologies a lot, because I feel like when it comes to the art, when it comes to the creative business, and even cultural preservation as a whole, they have so much offerings that they have kept within spaces. And the interesting thing is that, you know, these offerings that actually matters, a lot of people do not consume them. But for the people that actually consume them, it brings so much value and it brings so much retention to the future.
Wow, I have really learned a lot from you today. And you just brought poetry to life. As in, when you were chanting the other time, I had goosebumps. And I want to say congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
You've done well for yourself. From that little room in Eora, and now here you are on TV, and you have plans to go to O2 Arena. That is a very big dream.
Thank you,
and I really hope that you will achieve that dream. I pray that you will definitely achieve that dream.
Amen.
Okay, we've been speaking with Yusuf Alabi Balogun. We've been talking about the art of spoken words. It's still the conversation. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll hand over to the Lagos team.
Joy,
Uncle. Joy, how about Joy?
yeah, we can pardon Joy.
Joy, don't even start. Teach Yoruba.